Hello, everyone. Very good evening. So once again, welcome back, you all, for the AZ 900 Fundamentals Cloud Festival. So from the last 3 days that we are discussing in detail about an AZ 900 Fundamental Cloud Festival, that is to understand in depth about an AZ 900 fundamental concepts. So this is mainly for the Azure Microsoft to get the Microsoft certified Azure Fundamentals badge. So where you are completely understanding the Azure fundamental concept, which is respect to and multiple things. So for this, we have gone through like in the kind of an three modules. We discussed all the three modules. So we also discussed who can take up the exam and how you can handle that one, what kind of questions could have come up, everything that we have discussed in this discussion in the last 3 days. So today we'll give you a complete overview of this that makes you help for your examinations. So the thing is like this Microsoft Azure fundamentals. So this is like a completely and fundamental knowledge. So with both the non-technical backgrounds, such as like those who are involved in the business sector or the cloud-based solutions and services. So who have some involvement with respect to the cloud-based solutions and the services can take up this one, and even the complete the technical background. So candidates with a technical background who have, need to validate their fundamental knowledge to go with an the next certifications in their expertised area. So here we are discussing the three things especially. So one is like an completely the cloud computing. So what is like in cloud computing? So that's what we are discussing. And the second module is like we discuss much more is like about the Azure architecture and what kind of different services are there. And even third one tells about the management and the governance. So the governance perspective and even the cost perspective, and all, we will understand in depth there. So this course completely is to make you get prepared for the AZ 900 examinations, so and to pass and to get certified, so to earn your badge. So the very first thing that we have discussed, so we need to discuss is like, and what is the cloud? So we even, as I mentioned, I'm going through back all the topics that have been discussed as an overview. So this, if you have missed any of the concepts, so you could have get back on those things on today again. So I'm just going a bit fast, but not that slow, as we have discussed in the last 3 days. So what is the first thing in mind which comes up? What is like in cloud? So what is the cloud? Cloud consists of what it means. So we understood it's like cloud is someone else's computer. So cloud is a someone else's computer. It's nothing else. So the cloud is containing everything what we have in our local system, but it will be someone's computer, not our system. So the thing is similar, like an you call it as like a cab. So what is a cab? A cab means it is just a someone's vehicle, someone's car. So, but you can utilize, you need it. You will utilize that vehicle for like a week or as like a month or as kind of year. So, which is available for a service. So this, and for any different locations, you can take up the similar way, this cloud as well. So it's completely someone's system, someone computer, so which are infrastructure or the platform for your development of your applications of the software, and even the software as like the host to the services. So complete end-to-end features that you will get over the cloud. So this cloud is like, as I mentioned, is an ability to rent and compute the resources based upon the demand that you goes up. So cloud, so like in computing is like another part. So with respect to what is like to understand the computing. So you what is cloud, and the cloud, in that cloud what the computing will be performed. So for the computing, it is like an cloud computing is like an ability to rent the computing services, like in computer storage, networking, database, machine learning concepts, or as artificial intelligence concepts, IoT concepts. So all those, and this is like an available for you use in only like in for few minutes or a few hours based upon that you use, and also you need to pay for that. So it's completely you pay for what that you use, and there will be no like in long-term contracts or commitments that I will use for 2 years, 5 years. There will be no leasing, so it's like completely like an kind of rented basis. So what? And other thing is like this have an as I told, so this have like an ability to unlock so much value in the ability like in business to deliver like products and services to the end customers. So for so many businesses. So to understand what actually the cloud computing provides. Mm, yeah. So we'll go with this one. What actually the cloud computing will provide. So to understand that, cloud computing will provide you reduce like an upfront investment required. So that is the capital expenditure, the capex, which is like and very less is required. You don't want an huge investment as a capital investment at the initial stage, and ongoing or as like a monthly cost savings to your business because of the operational maintenance, that is the operational expenditure opex part will be less over as well. So like in there's a huge catalog, so you can get over there, in the resources, like a lot of list of resources, services, computing services that you are able to use over there. So they can serve your customers that you would like. Otherwise, you can choose whatever you want. So you can increase the other thing is whatever the service is available is completely based upon increased performance, availability, and the security to the end user. So the next is like an shared responsibility. So this is like to compare the responsibility of an on-premises or as like virtual machine, or else it could be an application service or like a software as a service and the Azure perspective. All the three things that we will discuss. So how the responsibility will be taken care. So the responsibility, when you think it's an on-premises, so on-premises responsibility is completely different. So you need to take care of an building security, you need to take care of a networking security or a physical network. So that's what physical network security, not the software ones. And you need to take care of a physical computer security, operating system patch or software updates or the licensing for the software or the operating system that you utilize in your system, and network and firewall settings, application settings, authentication platform. So these are all the things that you need to take care. In addition, who will handle the devices? So that is what the user account. So you need to take care of a user account and different kind of devices which has been used, and the huge data. So again, so the data safety has to be very much important. Your customer data safety. So you need to take care. So if it is in the case of on-premises, so it's an office, your own office. If you think you need to go then like an virtual machine, I don't want like an on-premises, I will just create a virtual machines. So in such case, so it could be like an building security, physical security, and the physical computer security could have reduced, but all the other responsibility retain back the same. So then you may think of, okay, instead of a virtual machine, I will go with an application services. So their only operating system patches could reduce. So you don't want to take care of the licensing software's update or as like an operating system updates and all. But in case of a net software as a service, that is a SaaS from the Azure, so then your responsibility is going to reduce like anything. It could like an only you need to take care of an authentication platform, and there is a shared way and user accounts, that devices and data. So looking into all these three with respect to the all the three services with respect to the platform, infrastructure, software, the responsibility model looks like this. So where the responsibility always retained by customers for the information and data, devices, and the account identity it will be there both the sides, both the customer and as well as from the cloud's perspective. But the responsibility varies for the few of the things like an application, network control, operating system, and all. So, and even for the infrastructure, it's a few of them. SaaS and the PaaS is like partially shared in between the end user, so Microsoft and the customer basis. But the responsibility transfers to the cloud provider, where the physical host, physical network, physical data center, nothing will be there at the side of on-premises if you make use of software solutions, cloud computing solutions. If it is only on-premises, then you need to take care of everything over there. When understanding the cloud modules, so the cloud modules here for first and public cloud. So public cloud, what actually there are like three things are there: public, private, and the hybrid cloud. So public cloud, it has like a service provides over the public internet to anyone. So who want to sign up for them or else Azure owns the hardware, and here we will rent it, the service. We rent the hardware here. So that's what in the private cloud. So the cloud service was offered only to selected users. So this is like sometimes called an internal cloud as well. So it looks actually like in cloud computing, but users resources and servers is available only to a specific company or as an organization or as like for the limited user. So here you own the hardware or you have like an exclusive use of it as well. The last one is like an hybrid cloud. So the hybrid cloud, so it's a mixture. It's a completely a mixture of own private network and servers and using the public cloud for the same things. So typically, user to like take advantages of an unlimited, inexpensive growth benefits from the public cloud here. So that's with respect to the hybrid cloud. So the mixture. So it's like if you look into the use cases of an each cloud model. So public or as like an private and the hybrid. So public cloud, Azure owns the hardware on their network and the infrastructure as well. Private cloud, it looks and acts like a cloud, and except the customer owns or leases or as like an exclusive access to the hardware. So those who have, for them only it looks like a cloud. So but for the remaining it won't be accessible at all. And the hybrid one is a combination, again, the public and the private cloud combination. So it scale the private infrastructure to of the cloud. So the cloud pricing can be like in complicated. It usually any services priced to 2 to 3 metrics combined all the time. It's not like straightforward. If you look into the example, Cosmos DB, it's a database, though one resource, multiple metrics will be considered. How many operations, how much the storage, how much the optional dedicated gateway used, and the backup storage will be used. In these different metrics, the pricing will be charged. And in Azure, it's like a few of the things free of the services are available: virtual network, private IP address, Azure Migrate, and that is migrating from your on-premises to the cloud, inbound internal traffic, 5 GB of outbound. So outbound is expensive. So outbound only 5 GB is free, and Azure policy, Azure Active Directory, 1 million executions of an Azure functions, Azure App Services, everything. All of these are completely free of cost. So in this Azure, you need to pay based upon the time. So for the time basis, you need to pay for like an virtual machines, application service, database, load balancer, manager storage, public IP address, for all these things that you need to be paid for based upon the time. So a few things that you need to pay for the based upon the GB as well. It's like in database storage, backup, unmanaged disk. So and even the network traffic between the regions. There are like 60 plus regions are there. So among those regions, the data transmission out will be taken care, and even the network traffic. So more than like 5 GB per month is. And pay for operations. So it's like an what kind of an operation that you do if it is a database. So if it is a database, would you read the data, or else would you delete the data, or else will you do perform the both the things, or else just you delete the data, read, write, and delete, or just write and delete. So what is the combination that you choose based upon that, and what kind of inquiries, database queries, and messaging. So in the depends upon different factors, the operations it will be charged. And the executions as well. So it is like in completely, there is a concept of a serverless that we discussed. So Azure functions, if based upon how many executions that you'll make, so how many times that functions will be executed, and serverless database, messaging service, and logical applications. And here the execution is completely consumption basis only for the Azure function, the logical applications. These two are mainly for the consumption basis. So even a lot of other metrics will be considered during the billing, especially billing the subscriptions. So, and one more thing is like, and prices always changes in between the regions. There are huge multiple regions are there. So the pricing will completely differ from region to region. And one more thing is like in CapEx and the OpEx, so capital expenditure and the operational expenditure. So there's the amount of money invested in an asset, like in building, computer equipment, like except like not upfront in returns to the profit of slowly over the time. So which is called as like in capital expenditure. But operating expenditure is like an amount of money that's spent every month for the maintenance. It could be operating expenses. Hopefully, it's like kind of a money and revenue from it from the every month how much it will be expended based upon that. We'll call it as like OPEX. So let's see the benefits of the cloud services. There are huge list of benefits are there. So the benefits are like and cost saving, both real and accounting availability, scalability, even high availability and manageability, security governance, global reach, and range of ready on-demand services, range of tools and all. So cost savings, you can see here as like in cash flow on the yearly basis. So which the capex and the opex concept as I explained. So it's completely like in one-time capex is an investment. So and it goes down, but the opex is like in completely monthly keeps on using. Completely on monthly, it will be expenditures like in maintenance kind of things. You can take actions to reduce your cost and auto scaling. So yeah. So high availability. So it's completely based upon availability. What percentage of time does a system respond properly or like an on request? It is like a 99.99% availability implies up to like in 4 minutes per month an acceptable downtime. So in such cases, high availability is like a system specially designed to be resilient when some components of its system fails. And that's what it goes like a 99.99% availability implies. So it means like for like a 4 minutes per month of it will be an as an acceptable downtime. So scalability, this is the ability of any system to grow of its capacity easily when a system reaches its maximum capacity. There are two kinds: vertical scaling and horizontal scaling. So vertical means keeping the same number of resources constant, but giving them more capacity. But horizontal scaling is like increasing or decreasing the number of resource instances. So as you increase the capacity, so it could have broke at certain period of time, so certain time. So the elasticity is like an ability of a system to automatically grow when the maximum capacity is reached, and automatically to shrink whenever the waste is to minimize the waste. So this is how to like an automatically based upon the growth. So the automatically it will maximize the capacity, but whenever it thinks of like and it's not the resources are not utilized, so it will like automatically shrink. So which is an elasticity. And the next is like in reliability and predictability. So reliability is like consists of two principles. One is like an resiliency and availability. To restore the systems and applications after a failure occur and provide consistent access to the system and applications, which are like a reliability. So there is a disaster recovery as well. So the disaster recovery is like to ability to cover from a big failure within a like an acceptable period and within like an acceptable amount of data lost. Right. So for all this, keep in mind the Microsoft have published and service level agreement, which is called as like an SLAs for their services, and the financial guarantee of their performance will be make sure. And Azure has established like a procedure for rollout and the regional recovery if they want to roll out. So what is the different procedures are also completely given from the Azure. Availability set and zones. So availability sets is like it is like in kind of the tools for the backup and the site recovery. This we are discussed in the module 2. So what is like an first is like and what are the regions and the availability zones, and then the data centers we have discussed much more completely in the module 2, and it will simulate the failures using Charles Studio. So global reach available in the cloud computing, and it's possible. It's not like possible for most business to run data centers in multiple centers, because if you could be in Africa, you could be in a Europe, or else it could be in a US or somewhere in Asia and all. So any place you can choose wherever the business you are running, you choose that region and your data center will be there. So these are the different regions that are available, like in resource regions are available from the Azure. So the Azure which has tried the best to cover the globally. So security and the governance part. So Security is like to protect the applications and data from the threats. It's like a full-time of job. So, and the governance is like in policies and procedures of any company that protect your account and the data, your data, whatever it is been stored. So technology like machine learning and artificial intelligence has been used to update the rules in like in kind of an Azure. So it will update the rules based upon the learning from the network. So identity is the number one vector. So for the protection, so and B DDoS protection is completely free. And the data governance, Azure policy, and the blueprints. These are the different concepts. And the monitoring is also very important to keep an eye over the network. So what is happening? So automation of an act and the events is like any intervention has happened. So automatically identifying it without the need of any human. The system has to be very smart enough. So you can see here as you go with an SaaS part, the lower administration is required and cost will also be reduced. So the lower budget is required if you go with a software service platform infrastructure. So here one thing is like an infrastructure is the bottom layer, so very bottom layer, like an hardware part. So SQL Server in Azure virtual machine, virtualized machines. And then the platform Azure SQL database, virtualized databases. And on top of the platform, you can see software as a service. So let's understand all these three things. First is an infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure, this is a computing paradigm. So where Azure provides you the virtual hardware. So what is a virtual hardware? So the hardware which is like an remotely. So it is like an you rented it, so you can access over the cloud. So that hardware, which is called like a virtual machine, load balancer, virtual network, and also you can have complete control over that. Because it's like a virtual machine is also as your personal computer. You can. So it replicates the exact function and the equipment that your physical personal computer will perform. You can do over the time on your own data centers as well. So like a firewall or as like a server, router configurations, the same things you can handle it. So few of the examples for this infrastructure as a service is like a virtual machine, networking, a load balancer, virtual network, load balancers, firewall, application gateway. So these are the different examples for the infrastructure as a service. Coming to the platform as a service, PaaS, so here you lose some control over the hardware part. So it's completely generally you upload your code here and you will just configure the environment in Azure to run those things. So it's not like completely an hardware part. You will lose the control for it. It will hand over only for an infrastructure as a service part. So some of the examples for this platform as a service could like application service, web applications, SQL database. These all could be different services for the PaaS. And the next is like a software as a service SaaS part. SaaS is like you lose even more control over the hardware. So for when it is like a SaaS, you won't get any control over there. So only the infrastructure as a service can provide you a good control over the hardware, but SaaS will give you like a very less often access over the control over the hardware. And generally, like Azure provides you an application that they develop, or as like an you just configure it to your usage, or as it's a tenant using their software things and all. The examples, if you ask here, you can get an examples like an Azure portal, Outlook, 365 and Windows Virtual Desktop, Azure DevOps, all those things. So serverless compute, you can call it as like a serverless computes. What happens, what actually does is it removes both the need to manage the infrastructure and the need to configure the environment that runs your code. So wherever the code will execute, right? So the configurations for that purpose, you probably need to take care of and manage the infrastructure, and also you need to take care of and configuring the environment. So those things not required. Actually, the serverless compute will take care of it completely. So if you ask for an examples over the SaaS is like an for the serverless, it's like an Azure functions, Kubernetes, application environment. So all those things will be a good example for the serverless. Next, coming to the second model. So second model is completely in architecture and the services. So as mentioned earlier, this carries an 35 to 40% of weightage from the whatever the services that will be used. So Azure core architectural components, let's understand those. So there's a when you look at the global infrastructure of the Azure, there are like in 60 plus regions are there. So the regions means a set of related interconnected data centers. So these data centers which are no more than a few miles apart. So you must select a region when creating most Azure services. So whenever you create a service of Azure, so you need to choose the region. So there are like currently 60 plus active or planned worldwide, and the most of them are like in any cloud computing provider can see. So you will not have access to all the 54 because some of them are restricted over there as well. So here you can see the blue dotted ones are the regions, and the dotted ones that you can see in Spain Central, Poland Central, Israel Central, or Mexico Central. So the dotted round is completely an announced region, and few of them, the white one, white on top of blue, the white dot you can see, which is called as like an availability zone. There is a concept of like a region pair. So each region, the 60 plus region, is paired with another region. So that actually provides the highest speed, low latency connection between them. So and also this Azure treats them as a pair. So it will try to minimize the chance of them going both like to go down at the same time. So it's like in good as a place to store the backup, right? So and the other redundancy server running all the time. So and the two more things so are like sovereign regions. So one is like a sovereign region. The sovereign regions is like it's like dedicated to specific entities, and it's completely isolated from other regions. It's not like you will going to get an access for that. For example, Azure government, so Azure government US and the China, Azure China. So these two are the completely and sovereign regions. It's like unlimited for few. The next is like an availability zone. So availability zone is like a part of an Azure. It's a part of an your Azure regions. So it's like a unique physical location within a Azure region. So it's made up of one or more data centers. So more data centers can be there in each um, zone, and there's like a minimum of 3 zones in each region. So you can see here. So there will be like, and there is a minimum of 3 zones are there in each region, and you can manually place your resources wherever you want. So based upon the availability zone or the highest availability for like availability, based upon your requirement, you can choose the zones here. So the zones is completely part of an Azure region. So you can see 3 or plus number of zones, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and in each zone you can see and multiple data centers. Some of the examples are there, and looking into the data center. So as mentioned, data center is like completely a group of interconnected buildings. So these are the data centers. So these data centers is a group of like an interconnected buildings in the same location, but that contain all the servers, right? So this is one of the data center. This is one of the this building is data center. This building is data center, and this is also data center. So the thing is the data centers which has been placed over here. So these data centers are like an interconnected buildings at the same. These are all in the same location, and also that contain all the servers. So power, wiring, and internet connected to run the Azure services. So this contain all the services which is required for to run the resources. Next is like an resource group. So Azure resources like a basic building block for an Azure. So for example, virtual machine, virtual network, database, container. So these are the basic building blocks, which is a resources for the Azure. So whenever we talk resources means, so it is like an these blocks like in virtual machine, virtual net, any kind of an item, so which will be used for the analytics computing. So those will be called as like an resources. Resource group is completely is like a folder structure of in Azure, so which can like can organize resources like in databases, virtual machines, virtual network, and like in almost any resource. You can group them. You can make like a single source of all that. So in this Azure subscriptions, so here like in billing unit within the Azure, all resources under the subscription get billed. So whatever the resources that you are seeing here under the subscription, everything will be get billed to a single owner who will be the admin. And also there are multiple subscriptions, which is like it is possible to create a multiple subscriptions to separate out the buildings. In this case, like in two subscriptions are there different subscriptions, and the billing will also be generated separately as well for those. And the very topmost is the management group. So it's like an hierarchy of subscriptions. So it can have like in many subscriptions and group them and also put them groups into another group. So that all can be possible over the management group. Okay, so coming to the compute types, you can see a lot of different compute types are there. So Azure Compute and Networking Service, we are using different compute types. You can see here compute services, virtual machine, hypervisor, or as it could be a container instance, Kubernetes service, Azure functions. Here, this we will discuss in the later as well in the upcoming slides. So I'm going to the next one. Management of groups, so you can handle the groups. So the hierarchy that we have discussed, the subscriptions, and then you can create a multiple management based upon the project. You can create the groups over there. So this is the computer networking. The computer networking, so we'll discuss each and every part of the, we discussed already the computer networking service, compute types. So first, compute services like in the category of services in Azure, so that provide CPU cycles for like in rent. So it's like an virtual machine, for example. So the virtual machine looks, acts, feels, tastes like a real server in front of you, except it is like an running inside Azure data center in a virtualized environment. It's not like a physically separate system that you looks like. And hypervisor is a layer that runs on top of the physical layer operating system that allows multiple guest operating systems like virtual machines to run in an isolated manner, like to isolated manner on top. So the container instance is the quickest way to create a container on Azure. So you can deploy an image, and let me go to that or scale set. Yeah, we'll discuss all this. Container instances like you can deploy the image and to Azure in like in a few minutes, and you can build an your complete environment. It can be useful in production, but not like an easily scalable one. So Kubernetes that we will call, so Kubernetes actually container in Azure. So Kubernetes containers in Azure, it runs on like a virtual machine scale set. So this as like an auto scaling, but also require more overhead to run the things. So the next is like an Azure virtual machine scale set. So the previous is like a virtual machine. So Azure supports only Windows and Linux virtual machine. It won't support the Mac OS. So the Mac OS is not there. So only it will support the Linux and the Windows virtual machine with like in dozens of variety of an infrastructure you can choose. So Azure virtual machine scale set is like a logical group of virtual machines on the Azure. So that can be configured and managed as a single unit. And also it's able to add more machines as like a demand grows. and able to reduce machines as demand goes down, and can handle like up to 100 virtual machines in a single scale set, and can be like configured to increase that to 1,000 virtual machines as well in a single scale set. It's like to handle the virtual machines. And the Azure virtual machine availability sets is there. So that is like an logical group. So that is designed to provide for redundancy and availability to meet the Azure SLA. So then last is like an Azure virtual desktop. So this is the completely like a desktop version of Windows. So that runs in the cloud. So you can just make use of a mobile phone or any of the device to access the cloud. So it's like a Windows virtual desktop. And it's like a hosted version of the Windows in the cloud. So user can log into the cloud from any device and see their installed programs, files, and all. So to perform virtual machine, some of the resources are required, that is like a CPU, RAM, and all, and storage as well. So hard disk drive and SSD and different storages are also required. So going to the networking concept with respect to the Azure. So network in that one we can see like when we talk like a network, so VNet, subnet, public IP address, networking interfaces, and all will come. So here we are going to discuss like a category of services in Azure that provide network connectivity. So performance and monitoring service, all the three things will be covered. So it's like completely networking connectivity, networking performance, and network monitoring service. So as like an for inter server and internet communications. So this is the four things, especially connectivity services, protection service, delivery service, and monitoring service. These are in the networking, the four different services that we actually look into it. Let's discuss each of that. So one is like an virtual network. So again, so that's like completely for the connectivity. It's a representation of a real network. So all the virtual machines must be connected to a virtual network. So that is a subnet, and that will allow them to talk to each other and to the internet as long as it flows the rule of the network that we will define. The second is like a virtual subnet. It's like a subdivision of the virtual network. So VNet. So that you control, and that has its own security rules as well that you can configure. And the third is like an VPN. So like a virtual network peering. The peering also is one more. So that allows you to connect two or more virtual networks in the Azure. And the express route, and there is like an a VPN gateway. So in the Azure DNS, so DNS services is like an hosting domain name resolution service in the Azure. And the VPN gateway is one more. So VPN gateway is like the device that allows encrypted like in private communication between like a single computer or a network of servers and Azure network and all. And the thing is like one more is like very important is an Azure Express route. So through this connectivity provider, it is able to like an ability to extend your Microsoft cloud networks to on-premises network over the private connection. So that's like separate private connections that you will be going to get to interact with your cloud with your on-premises device. So that's these all the different ones that we already discussed. So I'm just jumping on to our Azure storage services. So in the Azure storage services that we have discussed, like in multiple Azure storage things. So looking into the storage services, will completely covered with respect to the blob storage, disk storage, and even the file storage tiers, and all that we have discussed. So let's look into that overview of each of these. So when we talk about a storage service, so it's like a category of services in Azure. So that provide like in cheap, infinite, and file storage. It's not like you're going to value like it's like an infinite, unlimited data you can store. It's not, but you need to pay for that. So Azure storage is like a cheap place to store the files along with a basic table or some queue features or as like in paper gigabyte GB as an infrastructure as a service, you can manage those. And managed disks could be taken care, so that is slightly more expensive, but this allow like an Azure to provide some additional features that reduce the burden of managing your own storage account, pay per month for a provide GB limit infrastructure as a service and all. And the third thing is like in backup or recovery storage. So that is like you can as you expect. So this is like a specialized storage account that will manage your backups from virtual machines and the performance recoveries and all. And the Cosmos DB, it's like an extremely low latency, fast storage. Um, yeah, let me go back to that slide. Just give me a minute. Oh, okay. So the thing is like database services. I'll always like in category of services in Azure that provides fast, structured, and unstructured for both the things like in data storage services, database services are available. And there's a thing called like in Cosmos DB. So that is like an extremely low latency. It means very, very fast. So the storage and designed for like a smaller pieces of data and quickly to get it under the platform as service. So the one more is like an Azure SQL database. It's like completely a managed database solution that is compatible with SQL Server REST platform as a service. Azure SQL database for MySQL is like a managed MySQL database in Azure. And the Azure also have like an SQL database for an PostgreSQL. So that is like a managed PostgreSQL database in the Azure. And SQL managed instance, it's like a scalable cloud database platform as a service utilizing SQL Server database engine and Azure SQL data warehouse. So these are the different ones. In storage types, as I mentioned, so it is like optimized frequency access that we will get. So optimized frequency access for storage indicators like an hot or cold or like an warm, different kind of a storage, hot storage, cold storage, or like a warm storage. So or else we can archive the storage as well. So different storage that we can get it over there. And here we will get the redundancy options as well. So redundancy options are like an LRS, ZRS, and all. So LRS is like a local redundant storage. It means data is synchronized, synchronously replicate 3 times within a local single data center in the primary region. The 3 copies. So it means, for example, in one zone, how many data centers will be there? The 3 will be there, right? So in all the 3, automatically the lower locally redundant will what it will do. The 3 copies, the 3 times it will within the local single data center, the primary region, it will copy the things. Zone redundancy storage is like data is like synchronously replicate across the Azure zones in the primary region. So for example, in one region, there could be like a 3 or more zones, right? So in all the 3 or more zones, 3 copies, 3 zones, 3 data centers, only 1 copy in each zone will be maintained. So it is called like a zone redundant storage. So redundancy in a secondary region is also available. So that we will call like a GRS. So it's called as like a geo redundant storage. So that is like a data is replicated 3 times using an LRS, that is the local redundant storage, and then it's replicate 3 times into a single data centers in the secondary region. So storage account and the storage types are different are there. So one is like a storage account, right? Like it will provide access to your Azure storage resources. And the thing is like in blob storage. So this is like in Microsoft object storage solution for Azure cloud. Disk storage is like in block storage, actually block for Azure virtual machines. File storage is a managed cloud files shared access via SMB or NFS protocol. And to moving the file, there's some options are there. So for an information, so it is like an Yeah, this is the one we discussed. Manage. So to move the files, you can make use of an AZ copy. Is a command line interface tool for copying the blobs or files. Is a tool to copy either the blob or files is a AZ copy, and is a Azure Storage Explorer. So that is like completely an Storage Explorer is a web-based graphical user interface tool for managing your Azure storage accounts. And the one more is like a file synchronization tool for centralizing the file shares. And also there's how like a managed like a migration options as well. Azure Migrate, Azure Data Box. So Azure Migrate is it means it will tell like an it will provide the tool for discovering, assessing, and migrate the applications, infrastructure, and data from on-premises data center to Azure. So all those could be done through the Azure Migrate. In case of an Azure Data Box, hardware appliances, especially designed for like migrating the large amount of data from on-premise data center to Azure. So the last subtopic is like with respect to the identity, um, Azure Identity, Access, and the security services. So Azure Identity Service is like mainly contains the things like an authentication. Let me go on for that. Authentication, authorization. Okay. So yeah, authentication, authorization, over to like an admin root access, or different things will come up. So if, for example, if you want to get identified, so first you're like an you want to log in to your Gmail account or something. First you need to be get identified. Unique identification is required. So that we can call it as like an authentication. Is like you provide something so that prove who you are, and like user ID, password, multi-factor authentication like an SMS or application falls into the some of the application which goes into the same category of multi-factor authentication. So the old password secret key and all the ones, the old or traditional method is like an application, client application can talk to the server side, and the user ID and the password will be stored in a database and it will be fetched all the time. So traditional companies have written their own code to handle this one to make sure that to get avoid the hacking. So from the to make sure the data from the hacking uh, hackers, so will target from remotely. So for them, it's like an bought a thing called as like an Azure Active Directory. Let me explain in the diagram. So yeah, Azure Active Directory. This is the Azure Active Directory model. So there is a root admin or as like a root access. So before that root access, you need an authorization. Authorization is like once we know who you are, what permissions do they have? So that is an authorization. So authentication is like an providing something that proves who you are. So it's like an user ID and the password and all. But in case of an authorization, it's like make you can make use of that who you are by what kind of permissions you have. It's an authorization. Are you authorized to access or not? So Azure Active Directory is a Microsoft preferred identity as a service solution, and this Azure Active Directory revolves like an around the user groups, applications, managing the permissions between those objects and all that the Azure Active Directory. And the concept called like an Azure Active Directory connector. So the software that can synchronize your own premises Active Directory with Azure, and the Azure domain directory domain services is like a managed domain services on the Azure. There are like a multiple authentication methods also be taken care. Yeah, one among that is like a single sign-on. Single sign-on is an ability to use the same user ID and the password to log in into like a multiple applications, every applications that your company has or like an enabled by the Azure Active Directory. It not mean that you have to access everything from separate accounts. So everything you can access from the single one. Um, so integrations with the Azure services and this is what the difference in between the authentication and authorization that I've explained already. Yeah. Azure multi-factor authentication, so which is called like an MFA. So the concept here is like of having something additional to the password. So that is required for login. Passwords are like an findable and guessable. But having your mobile phone on to receive a phone call or the text, or as to run the application to get the code authenticator app. So is harder actually, or an unknown hacker could have get it. So that's like an harder thing. So those things, multi-factor authentication could be used, and it require two or more pieces of an evidences. The three factors you can use for a multi-factor authentication is like one thing that something you know, and something you have, and something you are. So first thing you know is like in password, the user ID and the password are the things that you know. But some things you have, like in the devices that you have, it could be like a mobile phone, access to the email account, and access to your devices, like all authenticator app and all those are the through the what you have. And something that you have is like a fingerprint or face recognition. All those things, completely depends upon what you have. So these are the different three factors that could be considered. So your one unique password, so it could be like an evidence to identify in the multi-factor authentication process. So SMS, email, authenticator app, phone call, these are the different ones. So and there is a concept of a role-based access control. So based upon the different roles, so the authenticator will be get that. So it is called like a role-based access control. So this is like assigning the permissions by a role instead of the individual. So instead of an individual one-to-one, so based upon the role, all the persons in the same role will be assigned within one permission. So that is called as like a role-based one. It create a role that represents the common task of the job. So and based upon that, it could be accountant or developer or business lead. So based upon the role, so their assignments or as the permissions will be authorized. And the zero trust is a security concept completely. So zero trust methodology is security model. So like it's like can completely never trust, always like can verify and use every available method to validate identity and authorization. So in zero trust methodology, it's like the concept like defense in a depth model. So it's like a multi-layer of an protection approach. The principle says like a very explicitly and very privileged access and assume the breach and all. The security layers, if you look into it, so this is the security policy enforcement. So you can see here the identity and the data is like the one side you can see the resources of the Azure, and the other side you can see the which could try to access those resources. The data is like that's like a virtual network endpoint, so which limit with an SQL server using the user rights, right? So, but the application is like that runs on the API management in front of the API application peripheral interfaces, and compute that is like limited remote desktop access, limit like SSH, run the Windows update and all. And network, it's like set up an NSG, use subnets, deny the traffic by default, the things. Perimeter is like DDoS. So DDoS protection, firewalls and all. Identity and access, there is an, again, the Azure Active Directory will take care, and the physical, that is like a door lock, fingerprints, and the key cards and all. So Microsoft Defender here like for cloud, so it's like a cloud security posture management. So we call it like a CSPM. And cloud workload protection solution. So for continuously access this environment and harden the resources and detect and resolve threats. So which is a Microsoft Defender for the cloud. So the last model that we have discussed is Azure management and governance. So this carries an weightage of 30 to 35%. So in this, especially is like we're talking much more about and discussing much more about the factors affecting your bill, which are the cost management perspective, what are the factors that are affected your bill, and what is the way you can estimate it. And all. So let's look into that. Which are the different factors? So the factors could be different. So and it could be like an you need to understand by which metric each service you use is charged. It could be like it could be some of them are free services as well. Free services like request group, virtual network, load balancer, Azure Active Directory, network security group, free tier web applications, and all those things are from often free. But some are like based upon completely different metrics. Paper usage, like in consumption model, 2 gigabytes that used or as for an execution, and paper time. So some of them are like pay per the usage. Paper time is like an time per hour or as like regardless of how you used it. And some look models for application design that we can save money is like in web applications and functions and all. So understand how the traffic from inside Azure to the internet is changed, like in charged and the data transfers between the regions. So, and we need to understand that Azure as development test options. Stability in pricing, pay for bandwidth, first GB inbound data is free, and yeah, how the Azure has like a separate development or test options for licensing for some software. So to perform all this, the pricing calculator, TCO calculator, which is available, there's a total cost ownership calculator. So this estimates for sure it's not like an 100% accurate calculation. So here you, during the calculations, you can configure few of the things like an region, type, subscription type, support type options, development or testing pricing, and all. So in here, the thing is like TCO calculator ownership, so or as the pricing calculator, it can estimate your Azure. So it's a completely an online tool. If you spend like a few minutes, so you can completely understand the options over the TCO calculator. So total cost ownership is like the all-in price of running a server. So that includes the cost of your hardware, the cost of the software, the cost of the human labor for installation and the maintenance, electricity, cooling, backup, and even if it's the rack, the space you need, right? To if it is on premises, then it is like in real estate, and then you need a 24/7 power backup, power connectivity, and the internet connectivity. This is the actually the total cost of ownership. So that's the if you make use of a cloud, what is the total cost of ownership of your cloud? So that's the TCO calculator actually tells that. The cost of a server is more than just the cost of like an hardware if you go with an other cost consideration and all. So the Azure cost management, there are like some tool is available, the cost management tool. The tool acts to analyze the historical spending in the cloud, and the billing is to manage your billing accounts. So the best practice of reducing cost in Azure is use Azure Advisor. So there's the concept of Azure Advisor cost tab. For recommendations, it helps you how to save much more. And also auto shutdown of like any development or fewer resources which is not in use. And the thing is like utilize the Azure storage lifecycle, or code or auto the storage tiers, and utilize reserved instances. It's like a 1 or 3 year contract if you're likely to use the virtual machine for that long. So that you can save some of the cost, reduce the cost, and configuring the alerts when billing exceeds the expected level. So you can configure the alerts as well if the billing is exceeding, and you can use the Azure policy to prevent the excessive spending, like restricting the virtual machine and implementing the automated scaling to reduce the cost, and downsizing the resources like managed storage account that are like a lot bigger than you actually need. You can use the tags as Azure tag. So the tags to more like easily identify named owners, projects for running the resources in the Azure. There could be multiple projects under the same subscription, right? So yeah, these all the different use cases of the thing. And next is like an Azure governance in the concepts in that Azure purpose of the Azure blueprint. So these are the different tools in the Azure to support the governance and the compliance. Azure Blueprint, Azure Policy, Resource Logs, and the Service Trust Portal. These are the four different ones which supported from the Azure as a for the governance and the compliance. So let's understand what is actually the Azure Blueprint. So Azure Blueprint is a way of defining like a template for subscriptions so that new subscriptions already come with a default set of user and policies. So instead of having to set a subscription before using a publicly like impossible missing of security policy, you can make use of this one. It's a in easy words, it's like a kind of a subscription. So just not to worry about an what kind of an policy rules that you need to create from the scratch. So it makes easy to start so faster way. So the Azure policy is to implement standards so for your organization across Azure. Rules can be like enforced by blocking the action of like just reporting the action. So built-in policies will be there. So some of them, so it's like an a few of the examples are like resource SQL server or as like an allowed storage account, allowed the regions of resources to be created, allowing the virtual machines or as the resources having tag and all. So these are the examples of built-in policies. So you can create the custom policy. So it's like if the built-in ones you don't meet your need, in such case you can go ahead and you can create your custom policy, and that will be completely in JSON definition, JSON standard. And then there's a concept of like a lock, resource lock. So you can allow you to lock the resources to prevent them from being like changed or without removing the lock, or like an easy way to stop someone function, someone like from accidentally stopping or deleting the important resources. So locks access control will be there, so that use the airbag. So you can limit who can access to those locks. So this is the one. So here the lock, whatever the resources you can lock or the subscriptions you can lock as well. So the next is like an service trust portal. So this service trust portal is that provide access to the various resources and the content of the Azure. So resources and content, I mean, it is like certifications, regulations, standards, reports, white papers, artifacts, industry and regional resources. So those all the different things that could be taken care from the Azure Service Trust portal. So it's available on this link, so you can access them as well. So then we have some of the development tools. So development tools are like a portal, command line interface, PowerShell, and the mobile application and all. So Azure command line interface, the Cloud Shell mobile application portal and all. So looking into those, the Azure portal. So it's like the website located at the portal.azure.com. Actually, if you use, so that you see to manage your Azure subscriptions and resources. it is like completely using a friendly user interface, so graphical user interface. So mobile applications like native mobile application of the Azure portal and the command line interface, the or is the PowerShell. So command line interface is to like in command line tool that allows you to manage your Azure subscription and resources using the scripting commands. And the mobile application Azure Arc. So Azure Arc is like a multi-cloud and hybrid management tool that works with non-Azure environment, managing the virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, and databases if they are like running on the Azure. So the management tool actually works with our non-Azure environment as well. In the ARM template, there is the resource manager. So ARM means Azure Resource Manager. So it's like an deployment management service for Azure resources. This is the common resource deployment model that underlines all resource creation or modification, no matter whether you use the portal, PowerShell, or the SDK. So that the Azure Resource Manager takes the commands and executes them. So this is the Azure Resource Manager, and the template is like an infrastructure as code approach for the Azure deployment, and that will be in a JSON. So you can see over here. So the next we discussed is an Azure Advisor. So what actually the Azure Advisor? Azure Advisor is a monitoring tool. So the purpose of this Azure Advisor is that it's like an to analyze your use your like an Azure and make your specific recommendations based on your usage across availability, security, performance, and cost categories and all. So this how it looks, the advisor. So yesterday we discussed even this concept. What is the major difference in between the Azure Advisor and the Azure Monitor, or as like an Azure Advisor and the Azure Service Health? So different things that we have discussed in detail. So next is Azure Service Health. So Service Health is like it is a customizable dashboard. You can customizable it as you want it. So that allows you to track the health of your Azure services in the region wherever they are used. So here you can see, as we have started discussed. So it's a service issue with respect to the network infrastructure. So what is on the bottom, you can see the root cause for the analysis as well, the connectivity issue. What is the connectivity issue? So that the complete details related to the issues will be given at the Azure Service Health. The next is like an Azure Monitor. So it's a monitor is like a centralized dashboard. So that actually collect all the log metrics and events from the resources. If you look at here, the metric is like it will monitor the things. It could be whatever it is, log analytics. It's like an editing any log queries from the data, or monitor the alerts based upon the metrics. Like it will provide a real-time alerts that proactively notify you when the issues are detected. And insights, it is like a tool of monitoring your web application performance. And SLA is there. That is the service level agreement, as I mentioned. It's a financial like a guarantee that they will deliver the services as promised. The agreement in between the customer and the Azure services. So a few more things are like Azure Security Center. Security Center provides advanced threat protections and a unified security management system. And the key vault will tell like an Azure management solution for the secret keys and the certificates. So the security information event management, the Sentinel will tell the information management and the security orchestration automated response solution. Azure dedicated host. So there's a service that provides the physical servers for use in by like a dedicated virtual machine and isolated machine, not like shared between the Azure customers. And there's a concept of like an Azure firewall. So it's a managed service inside the Azure that protects your virtual network from unauthorized traffic. And a distributed Daniel, so DDoS, so distributed Daniel service is like a type of attack that originates from the internet that attempts overrolling the network with millions of packets for bad traffic that aims to limit the traffic from getting through. And Azure DDoS protection is there, so there is a basic level of protection. So is included free. There is a standard level that you can upgrade for the pay for that, but the basic one will go for the free in the DDoS protection. And that will actually add logging, alerting, telemetry for you to see what the things are happening as well. Network security group is there, so that's a fairly basic set of rules that you can apply for both the inbound traffic and outbound traffic. That lets you simply specify the resources and destinations that are like in our ports or like an allowed to travel through the outside the virtual network and inside the virtual network and all. So the thing is like an ESG, so application security group, and the last is like an user defined groups. So these are the different ones. So user defined group means this is a way for like enforcing the traffic traveling over the virtual network over the specific path. So this is usually used in conjunction with firewall devices as root. Application security group is a way like in grouping the related resource together to simplify the way the NSG rules are created. So NSG means security group rules are created. So the best practice for the security, if you ask, all virtual networks should use actually the network security group, similar to locking the door in a browser. So the basic level of security, but not the ultimate one though. And enhanced DDoS protection should be actually used if you all like to be targeted, and application gateway with WF is like generally is a good idea for production systems, and the security through layers is also a good idea, because if one layer is breached, there are backups. So in that concept, like an Azure Security Center, so it is a unified security management and threat protection, and a security dashboard inside the Azure portal is available. So the thing is like in compliance, if you look into it, the lot of other concepts like an privacy and compliance resources is like an Azure Security Center, Azure Information Protection, Azure Advanced Threat Protection, Compliance, and all. So like this, if you look into the other Azure solutions, like an Azure Marketplace is like a marketplace means for Microsoft and third parties to offer their own solutions and the compatible with the Azure. So you'll find a lot of vendors. So you'll recognize like Cisco, Citrix, Barracuda Networks, Oracle, so many of them. And Azure will update, Azure updates is the one, so you can see, and even the IoT, thousands of millions of devices around the world that can collect collect the data and send them back to the cloud for processing. So in that there is a concept of like an IoT Central. So this IoT Central is an application or a platform that helps to reduce the complexity of an enterprise grade IoT solutions. And IoT Hub is like a managed and cloud hosted service for bidirectional communication between the IoT application and the devices. And Azure Sphere is a secured, connected crossover monitor unit used to use it as a high-level application platform for internet-connected devices. And the Azure Databricks, so it's a center dashboard for managing the big data in Azure, where data analytics, data scientists, and data developers, everyone can work together to drive the business intelligence for the data. As we already discussed, the Azure computing, so it's a set of Azure resources that allow you to use execute code in the cloud, but it don't require any you to manage the underlying servers, or as like having control over those performance functions, logical applications, application grid, or some of the examples of the serverless computing things. One more thing, probably you may have heard is an DevOps. It's a set of tools to help companies manage the development from development to development, including project management tools such as like boards, development tools such as like pipelines and all those things, which comes in a DevOps. Those who have an idea about the DevOps could have understand what is pipeline, what are the boards and all. Yeah, in depth. And the GitHub, so that provides hosting for software development and distributed version control using Git, and user code management. There's the source code management, SCM functionality will be supported from the GitHub as well. Cool. So we have discussed much more about the a lot of things. Even I was just, I mean, telling the lot of items which will come up, lot of resources that will come up in the Azure. So Azure AZ900 is so like an easiest one. So the very best way to get entry into the Azure certification. So those who are like taking up, just to revise the concepts once again, go through the recordings, and you can look into multiple documents or materials which is available on the Microsoft website. So you can make use of them as well, and just make use of those things, and you can go ahead with the Azure certification AZ900. And I wish everyone to make it successful and to get clear the certification in the first attempt. All the best for everyone. So just now we have discussed all the three modules, and I hope the overview helped you all to make sure, like, to get all the required basic concepts from the Azure fundamentals. So I would like to conclude for the day. So for everyone, it's like an all the best for your good luck for your examination for the AZ900. Thank you all. Thank you all for the session.